You see? I told you we'd won.
You said we hadn't won.
Yet. And now we have.
Wins, won, will win.
And now you're just being cheeky.
Do you suppose we should thank anyone?
Why spoil the moment?
Our condolences to the other nominees.
But rest assured, there's a universe where you stand here, the winner, and we weep quietly into our pillows.
Well, now you've done it.
Done what?
Made me feel sorry for the version of us that didn't win.
Chin up, other us. There's always next time.
The other universe had a far different history than the ones that resulted in Columbia. The Lighthouse City would come later, but first there was a man. His name was Andrei Rianovsky. In 1917, Andrei and his father Pyotr Rianovsky boarded a train to leave their home in the outskirts of Minsk, Russia, during the Russian Revolution. Pyotr's brother Dmitry and his sister-in-law Valesia were killed as they left the city for speaking against the communists. The tragedy was one of many events that led to Andrei having a sour opinion of the government. In 1919 he migrated to America and changed his name to Andrew Ryan. He struck oil and made wise investments, becoming a rich man. He approved of America for quite some time, but in the 1930s the socialistic practicals of his government disillusioned him from patriotism. In 1945, Dr. Bridget Tenenbaum turned from concentration camp prisoner to Nazi scientist, performing amazing yet terrifying experiments to the other prisoners. On the Allied side, Professor Julie Langsford engineered defoliants to take down the Japanese. Alan Turing, a genius codebreaker from the United Kingdom, invited a man named Charles Milton Porter into his code-breaking team to help the Allies, but Porter's wife, Pearl Porter, was killed in the London bombings. After the German defeat that year, 2 atomic bombs were dropped on the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Dr. Sophia Lamb lived on the outskirts of Hiroshima when it happened, and the event prompted her into psychology. When this occurred, Andrew Ryan, however, completely lost faith in all government and began to set in motion plans to build his own city. He sent his chief of security, Sullivan, a former New York police officer who was framed as a crook for not bribing, to quell some riots in his company. Meanwhile, Ryan called Wales and Wales architects to make some arrangements.
Of course, the buildings are being fabricated above the waves. But we will lower them on a lunette ring, submerged into the structure's steel frames. So much steel, you wonder. How will we keep so large a purchase from the government? Water is buoyant. We shall not frame Rapture in steel, but in aluminium. The government jackals may suspect me of building an air force, but never a city.
A former World War II soldier named Bill McDonough worked as a plumber for Bud Chinovsky on assignment, but his girlfriend Mary Louise Fenson stated she wouldn't marry a mere plumber. He applied for an engineering position at the Phoeben, Lieber and Quiffer engineering firm and was interviewed by Phoeben Jr. and some others, who rejected him. Chinovsky sent Bill along with 2 other plumbers, Roy Finn and Pablo Navarro, to fix the closets in Andrew Ryan's Manhattan apartment. When Bill arrived, Ryan was arguing over the phone with a man named Isley about taxes and the recent promotion of his secretary Elaine. Bill and Ryan chatted about their philosophical views. When Bill paid extra to make sure that the toilet worked properly, Ryan was pleased. The next day, Sullivan arrived to offer Bill a job as an engineer.
I met Ryan the day me and the lads were installing the bathroom plumbing up in his Posh Park Avenue digs. Oi, says he, what's with all the brass fittings? General contractor had me down for the tin. Well, I says, I suppose it's the contractor then who'll be bailing out your loo once a fortnight, is it? If it's price you're worried about, I'll be picking up the brass, so not to worry, Squire. And why would you be doing that, says he? Well, Mr. Ryan, profit or not, no man bails water out of privies built by Bill McDonough. Next day I finds out I'm Ryan's new general contractor.
In 1946, Sullivan met up with Wales head engineer Dr. Reuben Greevy and his guard Pinelli. Construction for the underwater city had been underway for a little while, and the US government began sending agents to follow Sullivan to find out what they were doing. Sullivan discussed Bill's new position and future plans regarding what they called the North Atlantic Project with Greavy. Meanwhile, Frank Gorland, a conman who grew up as an orphan working in theatre, managed to acquire a bar called The Clanger from its previous owner, Harve Merton, and his bartender, Marl Rooney. Frank made it a habit to change his last name quite often in his cons. As the owner, he made it a habit to eavesdrop on the potential information coming from his customers. There was quite a bit of talk of boxing concerning several boxers, including Joe Lewis, Billy Conn, Jack Johnson, Charlie Riggles, and Neil Still, from many patrons including men named Twitchy and Bianchi. An undercover FBI agent named Voss asked if Frank knew what Andrew Ryan was doing. Frank didn't know, but he wanted to know. Ryan had hired diving teams to scout areas of underwater buildings. One diver, named Irving, died in a diving accident, prompting his wife to drink herself in a stupor in front of Frank, exposing some details of the project to him. After hearing about how Neil Still was being paid to throw his next boxing match, Frank disguised himself as the mobster Lucio Fabrici and convinced Still to try his best to win the match. Frank then went with his bookie Garcia to a guy named Maury to bet on Still. Just to be safe, they had a lookout named Harley. While waiting, Frank followed some sailors that were talking about the North Atlantic Project. He found a man arguing with a Mr. Forrester on the docks about the dangerous work. Upon threat to death, the man spilled his secrets to Frank, and Frank learned about the construction of the city beneath the sea. Frank disguised himself as a truck driver named Bill Foster, and extracted more information out of Harry Brown, who worked for Rizzo, the administrator of the seaworthy construction. Ryan's chauffeur, Ivan Karlowski, took Bill and him to see Sander Cohen, a famous artist that Ryan admired. Once at his theatre, Bill and Ryan spoke with Jasmine Jolene, one of Cohen's dancers. Ryan liked her and offered to pay classes to improve her speech. He also introduced Bill to Cohen, but Cohen had to leave to speak with his assistant, Jimmy. Ryan expressed interest in inviting Jasmine and Cohen into his project in the future. Meanwhile, Harve Merton got a job working for the construction. Frank, Garcia, and a bodyguard named Reggie interrogated Merton and found out that Fortain's Fishies was a large supplier of food for the project. Frank intended to use that to his advantage. Frank Gorland set up a meeting with Captain Frank Fortain, the owner of the company. He lied to Fortain, telling him that the FBI were going to raid his company, and he convinced Fortain to sell the company to him. When the time came to pay Fortain, Frank just killed him and took his identity as Captain Frank Fortain, changing his last name once again. His newly hired crew, including a man named Bergen, didn't even notice. On November 5th, the city was established enough to walk around in it. Ryan took Bill in his plane, ship, and then bathysphere to go down to see the city Rapture in construction. Once there, Ryan and Dr. Greavy explained the workings of the city. They used what was called the Slinker to bring the main foundation down from above, and the Wales brothers were designing Rapture to be self-sufficient, utilizing geothermal power. Ryan was hiring brilliant and obscure scientists around the globe to invent new technologies, including Yi Sak-shong. Some of these technologies included the transparent glass metal alloy named Ryonium and an automatic repressurizing system. Roland Wallace took Ryan and Bill on a tour of a tunnel, but Bill noticed leaking water, deduced the problem, and ending up nearly dying but saving many lives. Wallace said, "Thank God." Ryan replied, "Don't thank God, Wallace. Thank a man. Thank Bill McDonough." In 1947, the bulk of Rapture's construction was completed. Reuben Greavy, Simon Wales, and Bill McDonough showed Ryan through the entrance to Rapture, which was a lighthouse in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, into a bathysphere down into Rapture. Various buildings in Rapture included Ryan Enterprises and Sinclair Deluxe. Rapture was only sparsely populated at this time, but one person Ryan invited was Augustus Sinclair, a shrewd businessman with a passion for science. Another man, Prentice Mill, owned Atlantic Express, where he aimed to have a line of bathyspheres for transportation in Rapture. Meanwhile, Ryan began sending out special invitations to people of high status around the world with beliefs in sync with his own, so they might emigrate to Rapture.
What is the difference between a man and a parasite? A man builds, a parasite asks, "Where's my share?" A man creates, a parasite says, "What will the neighbors think?" A man invents, a parasite says, "Watch out, or you might tread on the toes of God." On the surface, the parasite expects the doctor to heal them for free, the farmer to feed them out of charity. How little they differ from the pervert who prowls the streets looking for a victim he can ravish for his grotesque amusement.
In 1948, a lot of people had moved into Rapture. Bill and Elaine were now engaged. Ryan began to dedicate a speech to the audience of 2,000 in Rapture, speaking of the ideals that Rapture represented. Bill, Cohen, Greevy, Sullivan, the Wales brothers, Prentice, Elaine, a young talented writer named Anna Culpepper, and Ryan's new assistants Diane McClintock were present.
To build a city at the bottom of the sea, insanity. But where else could we be free from the clutching hand of the parasites? Where else could we build an economy that they would not try to control, a society that they would not try to destroy? It was not impossible to build Rapture at the bottom of the sea. It was impossible to build it anywhere else. I believe in no God, no invisible man in the sky. But there is something more powerful than each of us, a combination of our efforts, a great chain of industry that unites us. But it is only when we struggle in our own interest that the chain pulls society in the right direction. The chain is too powerful and too mysterious for any government to guide. Any man who tells you different either has his hand in your pocket or a pistol to your neck.
Afterwards, Cohen sang to the crowd a song written by Culpepper. Bill didn't care for the music and began to ponder the future of Rapture to himself. Meanwhile, back on the surface, Frank Fortain and his ship's crew, headed by Peach Wilkins, arrived on the lighthouse for shipment of food. Frank had been trying to get into Rapture any way he could. He sent letters down with some workers detailing some ideas for underwater fishing that might be useful to Rapture. From the lighthouse came a small security team led by Sullivan, who offered the chance to enter Rapture to Fortain and the rest of his crew. However, he stated that the sole rule is that once one entered Rapture, there was no going back. Fortain accepted. Rapture also needed some machines to regulate Rapture's many systems that kept it alive, so Ryan invited the best computer scientist in the world, Charles Milton Porter, who created Rapture Central Computing, which was set up in the building called Minerva's Den.
Mr. Porter, let me be the first to congratulate you on the founding of Rapture Central Computing. The great chain only grows stronger with each pair of hands laid upon it. I trust that you and I will choose to pull Rapture in the same direction.
In Rapture, there was a small area used for the maintenance workers to rest. When people had nowhere else to go, they would often end up there. Sinclair Deluxe was a small hotel in the area made just for such workers. Sinclair asked for a meeting with Sullivan concerning Tenenbaum, the former Nazi scientist now living in Rapture. He was concerned about her doing unethical experiments. Sullivan told him that as long as the subjects were voluntary, he wasn't empowered to do anything. Sinclair expressly told him that he cared for himself above all. He was just concerned.
I hear often, Mr. Sinclair, you just got a heart of stone. Don't you want to share with your fellow man? And I tell him, listen, I hail from sunny Panama, and my granddaddy, he got himself drowned building the big ditch. Went on and on about doing it for the people, for the world entire. Well, not for me, thank you. I came to Georgia to strike it rich, and Rapture all the more so. You won't catch me blowing my last bubble for any other personage, plural or singular.
In 1949, Comstock arrived in Rapture, having come from Columbia in an alternate universe. He changed his name back to Booker DeWitt and kept a low profile. He also started his own business, DeWitt Investigations, as a way to make money, but he spent most of it on alcohol to try and forget what he had done to Anna. By this time, Fortaine's Fisheries became a relatively successful business in Neptune's bounty, Rapture. Ryan and Sullivan bumped into Fortaine and Reggie. Ryan was concerned Fortaine might be smuggling, but could not find evidence for his suspicion. Meanwhile, Bill impregnated Elaine, and they were quite in love. Elaine worried about raising a child in Rapture. She specifically noted people like Dr. J.S. Steinman, a creepy medical doctor, but Bill assured her they were better off in Rapture than the surface.
Some hired Betty tried to sell me on those fancy Oxford Club ciggies. No thanks. I told her I'm a nickel tie man. Always will be. Why? Well, they smoke good and don't cost half a damn. Who cares if the things are made out of seashells and fish eggs?
A man named Albert Milanakis really liked his cheap cigarettes. Meanwhile, Stanley Poole, a reporter from the Rapture Tribune, was on the Metro with Ryan, Prentice, and Carson Fiddle, who was the designer for Ryan Amusements. By this time, personal bathyspheres were becoming popular, which made Prentice worry about his business. People asked Fiddle how the park was coming along. Fiddle was too nervous to reveal much about the development of the park due to the pressure from Ryan. Ryan then asked Paul if he would be interested in being an undercover reporter for him, which Paul accepted.
There would be no Rapture without me. No city without the Atlantic Express. Ryan took his first grand tour on my flagship coach. These days, personal bathyspheres are all the rage. My rails only connect the oldest parts of Rapture now. And the city's just left me behind. Plenty of cash in the bank, though. This private vehicle craze will blow over soon.
Ryan later made an announcement as a warning to some people who had been hacking into the vending machines.
It has been brought to my attention that some citizens have discovered ways to hack the vending machines. I should not need to remind each and every citizen of Rapture that free enterprise is the foundation upon which our society has been established. Parasites will be punished.
Bill and Elaine McDonough couldn't schedule a doctor visit, but Ryan managed to get them an appointment with Such Hong and Tenenbaum. The two doctors examined Elaine's pregnancy callously, promoting Bill and Elaine to exit early. Upon exiting, Such Hong and Tenenbaum met up with Ryan and Dr. Gilbert Gil Alexander in front of a mental man experiment with him. Bill watched as they argued about the experiment, but was led away. Later, they had a child named Sophie McDonough. Bill and Elaine decided to spend their evening within Fort Frolic, and they left Sophie with their friend Mariska Lutz. A lot of people came to the show they saw, including Paul, Sinclair, Daniel Wales, and one of the Sullivan employees, Patrick Pat Cavendish.
I tracked the problem that was blocking the tubes here, and you'll never believe where I ended up. The damn farmer's market, clear on the other end of Rapture. I fixed it right up and installed some new gaskets. Oof, what a mess. Anyway, the code is 0512 if you ever need to get back in there to do maintenance.
In 1950, Bill was working with the heating and cooling along with 3 other workers. Wallace, Navarro, and Kybers. Bill spoke with Andrew Ryan, and they discussed how many people were concerned about not being able to leave Rapture. Ryan discussed to bring a psychologist down to Rapture to ease their burden, so he invited a psychologist, Dr. Lamb, from the surface to join Rapture.
I'm told that the people grow tense and isolated in the absence of the sun. Now they clamor for a psychiatrist. Do they miss the state censor, I wonder? Wartime seizure of private assets? Or the checkup police vanishing them in the night? Regardless, this Lamb woman is said to be the foremost practitioner in her field. Fine. If she can quiet the rattling of the great chain's weakest links, I will leave her to it.
Ryan and Sophia were relatively amicable, but Lamb showed ambitious intent. However, she first needed to see the current philosophical issues with the people. She also gave Ryan the idea to use Ryan Amusements to teach children lessons about his ideals. He took her up on that idea and formed meetings between Lamb, Cohen, and Fiddle to design the park.
Today, Ryan asked me to give a backstage tour to a few consultants who will be working with him on designing the ride. I recognize some of them, but there was that composer, Cohen. This ride has all the acoustic qualities of a back alley hobo jamboree, he says. Lovely person. The Doc Lamb was a real treat, too. She looked at the exhibits like she was an owl with her eye on a titmouse. These freaks are gonna cook up some real fun for the kiddies of Rapture, I can see it now.
Meanwhile, Tenenbaum and Such Hong operated on two men, Archie and Stiffy, respectively. Such Hong failed to cure Stiffy's partial paralysis. Tenenbaum tried to take a sample from Archie's genitals. The procedure went badly, publicly, and she lost her job. She later found Archie and Stiffy working on the docks of Rapture. Archie made a run for it, but she was surprised to find Stiffy's paralysis gone.
I saw one of the smugglers having a game of catching on the docks today, and this surprised me because his hands were crippled during the war. He was unloading the barge the other day when he was bitten from the sea slug. He woke up the next morning and he found he could move his fingers for the first time in years. I asked him if he still had that sea slug. As luck would have it, he did.
Lamb interviewed a worker named Glidden who was barely able to make it from day to day. After hearing many similar reports from many different low-class workers in her therapy sessions, Lamb began to fantasize about the possibility of Rapture heading in a different direction, philosophically. Elsewhere, Ryan and Bill investigated two issues. Sinclair was dumping waste into the water, which managed to leak back into Rapture. Bill adjusted the pipes to accommodate, and Ryan said they would charge Sinclair for better pipes. Ryan and Bill also checked on a feud between Gravenstein's Green Groceries and Shep's Shop Mart. Gravenstein's store was covered in smelly, rotting trash. Gravenstein told Ryan that Shep had bought the trash collection service that was charging him 10 times more the going rate, running him out of business and only home. Ryan told him that he would not regulate the market. Gordon Shep defended his actions on the free market. As Bill and Ryan walked away, Gravenstein shot Shep and then himself. Ryan Amusements was completed under the new purpose of teaching Ryan's ideals. Ryan found the look of Journey to the Surface distasteful but loved the result. Lamb and Fiddle, however, were applauded by their creation.
I know this facility is vital to the preservation of secrecy in Rapture, but seeing myself transformed into that lurching, waxen nightmare, do children truly respond to this? Still, I spoke to a young man exiting the park after the grand opening, asking him what, if anything, he had learned here. He said his chores didn't seem so bad anymore, as long as Mother wouldn't send him to the surface.
I was hired to engineer a park the likes of which no man has seen. Now all I do is watch over it like a grizzled sheepdog. My first line of mechanical puppets made the children here coo with wonder. But Ryan thought my vision was immature. Antiquated, he said. This place could have been something magical. But instead, he turned it into a school. No, a cathedral. Dedicated to himself.
Imagine you are a child, born here, underwater. You've never seen the sun. But Rapture is a secret. Contact with the surface is forbidden. So, your parents bring you somewhere to feed you iced lollies and terrify you out of ever leaving the perfect city all around you. That's Ryan Amusements, and I consulted on it. This concludes my business with Ryan Industries. Permanently.
Ryan Amusements did, however, become quite popular with the kids. The Journey to the Surface ride became a sort of a haunted house ride.
I've got a little dating tip for you, Jimbo. It'll get you out of that lonely hearts club for good. This scheme works 100% of the time, guaranteed. First, find some Betty and take her to Ryan Amusements. Then, you go to the gift shop, buy her a teddy bear. This is key. I ain't kidding around. Then, you buy her a ticket on Journey to the Surface. As soon as you hit that first scare, bingo! Tunnel of Love.
Working security at this park should have been a breeze. Point some old ladies towards the John, listen to the radio, maybe pull down the brim of the cap and catch a few Z's. Turns out, I'm on my feet more than a beat cop. Teeny boppers jumping off the ride, kids throwing ice creams at the exhibits. I've got someone in the holding cell every day. Brother, this park really brings out the best in people.
Lamb's disgust with Ryan Amusements prompted her to begin her own development on a project she called Dineus Park, but she continued her therapy sessions under Ryan. She interviewed a woman named Margie, who was once a talented dancer who was now reduced to being abused, pregnant prostitute. Lamb made notes on how she could use the low-class workers' woes to her benefit, and she offered Margie a job on her new project. Margie gleefully accepted. Meanwhile, there was a bunch of other citizens who had their own problems, which they recorded in audio diaries without any more known context.
Best drink I ever had was a tin cup of rot gut, just after throwing the last seam up on Hephaestus. I remember thinking, we just built paradise. A hard. Ain't never gonna top this.
Rookie kid comes up to me, Joey Glatz, a real bang-up guy. Says he wants to be a great ball player. Says I'm his hero. You want to learn? I say, keep your eyes on me. Kid asks how I deal with the press griping about me. There's no I in team and all that. Well, the way I spell it there is, Wilkins does things his own way. That's what makes a champ.
Limits? Yeah, I remember topside the limits. Yeah, how you should behave in that. But those limits you can beat. But how deep could I dive? How fast could I go? Them are stricter limits. You need machinery to beat those, and that's just more limits. I want to be speed itself, right? The force rushing through things, not the wind, but the velocity. Not the tide, but the power drives it. That's what I want. Like the way a grape is wine. That's me. The thing inside that bursts through. That's why I came to Rapture. To get beyond limits.
I arrived in the city starved for proper intellectual stimulation. They rushed to my show in droves, chomping at the bit, salivating like Pavlov's pets. I gave them what they hungered for. I could hear this collective thought, this single, greedy, constant thought rebounding in the rapacious hollows of their minds. Give us more. It's not enough. We need more. I soon understood that this was a city of trainable beasts, and and intellectual satiation would be my means of control.
These Rapture men, they are the strongest, the brightest, yes, all of these, yet they are just men. Oh, how strong they are, how intelligent, how sensitive, until they look into my eyes. And there, they see themselves as if for the first time. This they never survive. How it hurts me to see what they find in my eyes.
I got me a handsome collection of felines topside, of all shapes and sizes. Ain't no woman alive could part me from my pussycats. And here's old Andy Ryan trying to tell me I can't bring my babies down here? Well, sorry, Andy, but you are not my daddy. No man tells me what I can or can't do. Fontaine didn't bring me down here for my skills as a stevedore. He needed guys who could keep their mouths shut. I look at it like this. Everyone's a crook of some kind or another, and us guys who admit it, we got a leg up on them that don't.
Using the sea slugs that she had bought, Tenenbaum found they were capable of editing the genome significantly.
This little sea slug has come along and glued together all the crazy ideas I've had since the war. It doesn't just heal damaged cells, it resurrects them. I can bend the double helix. Black can be reborn white, tall, short, weak, strong. But the slugs alone are not enough. I'll need money. And one other thing.
Tenenbaum asked Ryan for funding to look into it, but he dismissed her as fanatical. Such Hong expressed interest in practical applications of her discovery, but also lacked funding from Ryan as well as test subjects. No one else would risk funding their crazy science using the secretion she called Adam.
To my daughter, Eleanor, soon you will be born, and Rapture will be your home. You shall be raised as I was, to advance the common good through social psychiatry. This city's potential is immeasurable, Eleanor, yet our beliefs are unwelcome here. Life will be difficult, but the price of revolution is always dear. If we are patient with her, Rapture will come to us.
About this time, Sophia Lamb had a daughter named Eleanor Lamb. The child was a project of science, and while Lamb was indeed Eleanor's mother, she had no real father.
Eleanor is progressing brilliantly. My physical participation in her birth was minimized, of course. It is vital that I am unhindered by nature's crude bias. I will be, above all, her intellectual progenitor, loyal not to her, but to the people she will ultimately save. But I admit, it is with some measure of pride that I review her marks in standard intelligence tests. As an agent of our beliefs, she may surpass even me.
In 1951, Fontaine was sleeping with one of Ryan's employees, Marjorie Dustin. He was also paying her to edit Ryan Industries' records so Fontaine made more money. Fontaine's fishery success began to dwindle as people tired of fish, so Fontaine used his submersibles to smuggle beef, Bibles, drugs, alcohol, and letters, and other items into Rapture at a large profit. Ryan, suspicious, set Karlowski to keep an eye on him. Fontaine, in his apartment with his bodyguard Reggie and chef Anthony, arranged for a meeting with Sachong and Tenenbaum.
As the respectable labs have all turned me away, I have turned to Fontaine's smugglers in Port Neptune for supplies. Fontaine's men are pigs. They spit, they stink. But they deliver, and they don't ask questions. They're all terrified of Fontaine. He reminds me a bit of the Germans. So efficient. It wouldn't surprise me if he were soon running things down here.
At the meeting, Tenenbaum and Su Chong expressed interest in 14's money to fund experiments utilizing Adam. Su Chong claimed that Ryan was just a client and not his superior, and Su Chong wanted to alter the genes in plants to create nicotine candy. Tenenbaum, however, wanted to try altering human DNA. For both of their purposes, they both required human test subjects. Fontaine believed this science to be the future, and he made the deal. He would pay them and supply them with prisoners to use as test subjects in return for the rights to profit off the research. He even suggested they would bring Gil Alexander on board, but only if they all made sure Ryan knew nothing.
I was at German prison camp, only 16 years old when I realized I have love for science. German doctor, he make experiment. Sometimes he makes scientific error. I tell him of this error, and this make him angry. But then he asks, how can a child know such a thing? I tell him sometimes I just know. He screams at me, then why tell me? Well, I said, if you are going to do such things, at least you should do them properly.
Spent the morning jawing with that Kraut scientist. She's damaged goods, all right. Just like all those chumps they scraped out of them prison camps. But she's no crackpot. She's gonna make me the kind of scratch that'll have Ryan look like he's running a paper route. She just needs some supplies to get the ball rolling and a friend to watch her back.
In 1952, Tenenbaum created an agent to re-energize the atom called Eve. Without Eve, the atom burned out after too long. Su Chong invented plasmids, solutions that aimed to control and refine Adam within a person. Dr. Wiltham managed to get his hands on one of Su Chong's experimental plasmids, one that was engineered to help mental processes. He gave it to one of his patients, Edith Crenshaw.
Why can't Franklin read quietly in a corner like I did as a child? Careless. Not a single thought to where an accident might leave us. Dr. Wortham prescribed a plasmid, a mother's little helper to keep me sharp. I've had my misgivings, but I let my guard down for a second. That boy may get himself killed.
Some of the computer scientists in Rapture's central computing made the world's first video game in their spare time called Spitfire. It was a crude game with X's and zeros as the scoring system, but they had some fun with it. Porter thought it really amusing, but his assistant Reed Wall detested it.
Some of the boys in the code pit whipped up a real doozy of an entertainment. Monitor screen hooked into a sort of tiny airplane cockpit, yeah? And that's swell, because what shows up on screen is an X, that's you, and a bunch of O's, like a Spitfire surrounded by a squadron of Jap Zeros. You fly your little X around and shoot them down one after another. Wall caught us at it one night, called it a waste of time. I don't know. On balance, ain't it better to change what's on the screen than just stare at it?
We all come down here. Figured we all be part of Ryan's great chain. Turns out Ryan's chain is made of gold, and ours are the sort with the big iron ball around your ankle. He's up in Fort Frolic banging fashion models. We're down in this dump yanking guts out of fish. Fontaine's promising something better. He's like one of us, you know, like he's worked a day in his life. He says meet him at his fish packing joint at 11. I'll go, bring a couple of guys. Hey, it's not like things could get a lot worse.
By 1953, Peach Wilkins was a low-class worker working for 14. However, he began to find that it wasn't as great as he thought it was going to be.
Fontaine's putting the screws on us, and double. He's squeezing us out of 80 points of our cut with the threat of turning us into Ryan if we don't play ball. Son of a bitch. Sammy G comes and tells me he's thinking of going to the constable. And the next day, Sammy G was found in a sack in a salt pond. We got no choice here. We stay on Fontaine's crew and we're gonna catch the gallows. We take powder, and we end up like
Meanwhile, a former mime felt degraded that he had been reduced to a clown.
By God, it was only 3 years ago that I was considered amongst the preeminent pantomime artists in France. My countrymen held the art form in high esteem, but in Rapture, I have been reduced to a simple clown, humiliating myself for these cackling little brats, ushering them snot-nosed into this wretched amusement park. I've stooped so low as to speak while performing. On the surface, I may not have been rich, but I had my dignity.
Elsewhere, Bill created his own tavern and company called Fighting Madonnas. Sullivan, meanwhile, noticed people going missing, and he found while 14 scientists carved corpses. He went to investigate the docks and the fisheries when he was ambushed. 14's man, Wilkins, had paid off Mikhail Lasko to kill Sullivan. He nearly did so when Karlowski killed Lasko, saving Sullivan. Lasko had a list of smuggled items that was faked by Wilkins to make it look like Lasko, not Fontaine, was the smuggler, but Sullivan knew this.
I'm closing in on the whole ring. I'd pat myself on the back, but let's face it, these aren't exactly bloodthirsty desperados we're talking about. Rapture's full of poets, artists, and tennis players, not hired guerrillas. But this leader of theirs, this Fontaine, he seems to know his way around the grift. He keeps his nose clean, but not so clean that the right people don't know he's not to be trifled with.
Willie Broham tried to steal fish with a hook, but was caught and sliced open with his own hook. Unconscious, he ended up in Tenenbaum's care. She extracted Adam from a slug and injected him with it, while Fontaine watched and Shijong protested. He insisted studying the brain might be more lucrative than studying genes.
At the German prison camp, they put me to work on genetic experiments on other prisoners. They call me das Wunderkind, the Wonder Child. Germans. All they can talk about is blue eyes and the shape of forehead. All I care about is why is this one born strong and that one weak? This one smart, that one stupid. All that killing. You think the Germans could have been interested in something useful?
After the injection, Broham's gash mended itself, healing immediately. Tenenbaum and Fontaine were ecstatic, but Suchong worried about potential side effects or addiction.
That's quite a little monster Fontaine's dug up. When she does speak, which is almost never, her accent is thick and grating. Her hair is filthy and she seems to wear the same mustard-stained jumper day after day. But I've got to hand it to Frank. Tenenbaum is the old-timer diamond in the rough. No formal training, no experience, but put her in front of a gene sequence and she's Mozart at the harpsichord.
Meanwhile, Dr. Steinman conducted facial surgery and plastic surgery in the medical pavilion. His assistant, Miss Chavez, informed him that the latest patient was ready. The patient was Sylvia Pleasant, who was engaged with Reuben Gravery's son, Ronald Gravery. The surgery was a success, but Steinman felt unfulfilled. He was psychologically disturbed, ever wishing to freely sculpt human faces, and he experienced drug-induced hallucinations of Aphrodite encouraging him to do so. After not that long, Tenenbaum began swimming with Fontaine, to which he was happy to oblige. Elsewhere, Bill decided to ride Journey to the surface, a ride in Ryan Amusements. Roma said it was aberrant, and Bill wanted to check it out before Elaine or Sophie saw it. After riding it, he vowed to make sure they would never ride it. Sullivan arranged a meeting with Fontaine's man, Wilkins, and tried to convince him to turn Fontaine in to Ryan for smuggling. However, Wilkins wasn't going to betray the more dangerous man.
The Irish pork pie offered me a deal. I flip him Fontaine and I walk out of here. That's simple. How do I know that fat fuck isn't Fontaine's guy? How do I know they're not all Fontaine's guy? Fontaine's got Adam, and everybody wants it. Ryan's got a whole lot of talk and a nice suit. Even down here, any idiot can see which way the wind is blowing.
By 1954, Lamp had completed Dionysus Park, and she had many followers with her ideals to keep it running. The park exhibited pieces of abstract art that opposed Ryan's ideals. Simon Wales was depressed about how leaks had been spoiled in Rapture, and no one was willing to hire the Wales brothers anymore. Lamb spoke with him, trying to convince him of Rapture's folly. Alina busily played with an audio diary.
Hello, Mr. Diary. Want to play? Actually, I'm quite busy right now, Miss Eleanor. Maybe later. Well, all right. But do you mind if I take you apart while I wait? I promise I'll put you back together.
Wait! You can't do that!
No! Wait! What? Eleanor!
Dionysus Park. Lamb mocks me in the naming of this place. She knows precisely how I feel about this celebration of unconscious art. The artist reflects the world as it ought to be, not as it is damned to be by some spasm of the lower mind. I shall not censor. The park is Lamb's property. However, if the case we are building against her proves true, I will return with a sledgehammer.
Lamb convinced Simon to embrace his religion, regardless of what Ryan thought. So Simon decided to indeed do so, and he joined Lamb's circle, for Lamb would protect him. His brother, Daniel, wasn't happy about this decision.
Blast it, Simon! So Rapture leaks. Crying about it's only going to add to the surplus of moisture, innit? Nothing's to say it's our design. But Simon goes to see Dr. Lamb anyway, beset by guilt, because we can't find another contract. Then he comes out the other side, saying he's always wanted to take the orders. He's Father Simon Wales now. If I ever see that Sophia Lamb in the street, I'm gonna give her the back of me frickin' hand, and a nut on the head besides.
Back at 14's, Suchong and Tenenbaum demonstrated plasma they created. They managed to have the subject, Brown, produce electricity from his hands. 14 was startled at first, but then he began to imagine the possibilities of marketing supernatural powers like this. He began planning on buying a much bigger facility within Rapture, but Suchong and Tenenbaum told him there were risks. They showed 14 a patient with which they tried to give animalistic powers. The abomination with its face, beak and exposed organs scarred 14 so much that he wished he had his bodyguards, Reggie or Lance, with him. Tenenbaum said that they understand how to control it now, so no more abominations will be made, so 14 told him to kill it.
Old Papa's Drop's the worst neighborhood in Rapture, but it's a hell of an opportunity to raise up some affordable housing. When Atlantic Express was constructing their luxury passenger line, this place was hollowed out beneath as flop houses for the railway crew. Nobody was supposed to reside down here long term, but when you're broke in this town, you're not exactly swimming in alternatives. I don't favor spending more than an hour or so down here at a time. There ain't a side of the tracks more wrong than under 'em. If a smart fella wanted to talk some bankrupt fat cat into moving to a slum, he'd call the place a hotel on the nightly. The tenant dries his eyes and tells himself it's only temporary, and the smart fella shaves a dime a day off his drinking wage. Now, a smarter fella might also bankroll the local gin joints and take him for the rest.
The maintenance area where people who had nowhere else to go lived became known as Pauper's Drop. Augustus Sinclair was cheap, and he let Sinclair Deluxe become run down, and he began using it instead as a very cheap housing. He also set up Sinclair Spirits, a bar, to make extra cash. Sinclair also made a deal with a gift shop owner named Silas Bantam.
Used to be, there was no margin in running the gift shop. I couldn't hardly sell off this tourist crap for a penny more than the cost of manufacture. Then I met a straight shooter named Sinclair, and he laid a sweet deal on me. Says he's got some hard luck folks down at Pauper's Drop can whip up this junk at half the cost I used to pay. Yeah, I had to pick a needle or two out of the shipments, but all in all, nobody's the wiser, and I'm all the richer.
One resident of Pauper's Drop named Elliot Nelson tried to make money off of Sinclair by assembling needles, thinking he was ripping Sinclair off. However, Sinclair was actually ripping him off, since the price of the parts were not as Elliot thought.
And that's 100. What a snap. Give Sinclair a few bucks for a load of vials and needles, then it's evenings putting these syringes together while I listen to the radio. Sell them back to Sinclair twice the price. What a racket. A few pinpricks here and there is nothing to complain about. Gonna be back on top soon. Thank you, Mr. Sinclair. Sucker.
Now, I'm a modest man, but my piecemeal needle scam's an outright masterpiece. Some slob shacked up here buys a box of syringe parts from me for twice what it's worth. He assembles them in his rat hole, and I buy back the finished product for a dime against the dollar that I'll get from Ryan. Profit coming, profit going. Old Andy rambles on about the great chain. I got people shelling out to pull it for me.
Grace Holloway was a blues singer who lived in Pauper's Drop with her husband, James. He spoke her against Ryan's policies and then mysteriously went missing.
He's gone. James was the only man I ever loved, and now it's like he never even came to Rapture. He heard me sing at the Limbo Room, came up all bashful. He liked hearing songs about what it's really like to live in this town. I think he's been trying to organize folks against Ryan. And now he's gone, and I'm here, singing Rise, Rapture, Rise. Scared to death they're gonna come for me.
When Grace found out about the counselling that Lamb was providing and how she cared for the low-class workers, Grace decided to approach Lamb for a therapy session.
My folks lived in the St. Louis Hooverville in 32, and the Drop is worse by a mile. Nobody's supposed to live down here, city pissing on us. Never try. Ryan doesn't care, and Fontaine's a damn crook. But Dr. Lamb cares. We're still people to her. She's offering free mental counseling on Sundays. When I go, I get the feeling she's got a plan for Rapture. And for me. Dr. Lamb, Sophia, I came down here to sing and to start a family, but I just don't fit with these people. Look at you. You fit with them.
Grace, in Ryan's Rapture, I am the pariah. You and I share unpopular ideas, but I wonder, how devoted are you to the Rapture people? If you wish to know more, wear this butterfly brooch at our next session. If not, no harm done. We shall never speak of it again.
Lamb began recruiting patients into her circle, which she called the Rapture family, whose insignia was a butterfly brooch. She invited Grace to consider joining, and Grace indeed came back.
Alright, Doctor. I'm here. But don't think wearing this butterfly means I'm happy.
Grace, I know you all too well. Want of child defines you. But biological loyalty turns us against the rest of the world, whom we ought to love in equal measure. Your poverty is testament to that, but your voice inspires the people. I am asking you to join a much larger family. Though your body failed you, you shall live on in us.
I was on my way to a new badge. High and mighty Lieutenant Asshole in Ryan's private forces. But Dr. Lamb showed me that I got a duty to the common man, not Ryan. I feel like praying, and I ain't said 2 words to God since I was in short pants. And I'm not alone anymore. There's lots of us wearing her butterfly pins now. So what if it looks a little bit, you know, twinkle toes?
Third session today with this amazing limey shrink, Dr. Sophia Lamb. She said that all Ryan's horse shit about always looking out for number 1 is turning us little guys against each other. And what we need is unity, solidarity. Then, she held up a mirror. Turns out, I wear my hair and mustache just like Ryan. So today, I'm spreading spreading the word about Lamb. And tonight, I'm shaving my whole stupid head.
Rapture is a paradise of the ego, Eleanor. Under Ryan, the voices of an entire city sing the virtues of greed and pride. But truth, rather, is in the body. Already they grow weary of struggling against one another in fruitless competition. Observe the bent backs, the drawn faces. Ryan promised us more, they seem to say. In what shall we now believe? And Eleanor, it is our task to answer.
Lamb sent an invitation to Porter to invite him into her inner circle, but Porter immediately shot it down and threatened her.
Dear Dr. Lamb, I received the invitation to your little social club today. In return, I'd like to make you a wager. I wager you need Rapture Central Computing just a little bit more than I need your half-baked metaphysical mumbo-jumbo. Ideal in science, not whatever it is you're up to. You keep out of Minerva's den, and I'll keep this city's automation from grinding to a complete and sudden halt. Sound fair?
Lamb did not try to contact Porter again. At Ryan's request, Pooley attended a speech that Lamb was giving to a crowd of low-class workers. Lamb preached about the unfairness of Rapture, rallying the men around her. Pooley noticed that Simon Wales and Fontaine both attended as well. Lamb inspired Fontaine because he inwardly claimed that she was using her skills in psychology to manipulate the workers to rally under her for her own agenda.
Lamb is becoming a problem. The woman is a damned collectivist. Here in Rapture, how could the council fail to see it? Worse, to hide her intent, she gulls these patients of hers into a religious frenzy. A new Kremlin will rise and swallow the council house before they realize they've been had. I will not have my city swindled by the parasite, whatever its guise. It is time, I think, to call Sinclair.
When Ryan found out about Lamb's antics, he made an arrangement with Sinclair to create the Persephone Penal Colony to hold problematic criminals. Within the facility, Sinclair found a pseudo-legal firm for taking care of problems that he called Sinclair Solutions. He got Ryan's pressman, Paul, to help him infiltrate Lamb's circle.
Persephone, secret home of Sinclair Solutions. I bet against Andy Ryan's vision of harmony and rapture, offered him a quiet place to send anybody who wasn't working out, and now I'm sitting on my own private think tank. Technically, Utopia shouldn't have much use for a detention facility, but if you do business as long as I have, well, you learn to pick a brand name from the writing on the wall.
I met with Sinclair today of Sinclair Solutions. It's this pseudo-legal firm he set up to take problems Ryan doesn't want to admit he has and make them go away. I could fill 40 front pages of the Tribune with stories about this fella if he wasn't paying me not to. And he's got work for me, right? I ask what? And he flashes me these $1,000 Steinman teeth saying this job will, quote, change history.
14 set up a new company called 14 Futuristics, where he, with Suchong and Tenenbaum, sold gene tonics and plasmids to citizens of Rapture that could do many things, from increasing hair growth to producing electricity. Bill was at a meeting with Ryan when Ryan showed him the newspaper advertising 14 Futuristics. Sullivan interrupted the meeting because Ryan asked him to come. Ryan told him to stop focusing on the smuggling and to look into the plasmid business.
Gregory, don't come whining to me about market forces, and don't expect me to punish citizens for showing a little initiative. If you don't like what Fontaine is doing, well, I suggest you find a way to offer a better product.
Sure, you hear it in Rapture. One of the business types asked me, why don't you splice white? Get ahead. Well, that's some idiocy. I told him, first of all, I am ahead. Second, in Rapture, it's your work that's supposed to matter, not your skin. Too bad for some folks who can't splice in common sense.
The central machine regulating Rapture was called the Rapture Operational Data Interpreter Network, or RODIN for short. Upon the marketing of Adam, Porter found that it could also enhance the speed of his machine. He improved upon the design of RODIN, using Adam to make it perform much better than any machine on the surface. It became so smart that people began to call it the Thinker. Porter liked the name, and he even used some of his funds to commission a duplicate of the Greek Thinker statue to place in Minerva's den.
Mr. Ryan hired me to build a computer that could keep an entire city running on time. The Rapture Operational Data Interpreter Network. Folks call it the Thinker for short. We've harnessed the power of Adam even in this, allowing the mainframe to process data at the speed of thought. In other words, it thinks for us. Yes. And with the completion of the independent reasoning processor, it may finally think for itself. If Turing could see me now.
Porter, it has come to my attention that a certain prominent bronze figure has been installed in Minerva's den. An original cast from the mold, no less. Such indulgence leaves a trail. If that costly little souvenir brings the looters sniffing to my door, and I am forced to gun them down, it will be at your feet that I lay the blame.
Some employees that worked for Porter began to feel unappreciated, like his colleague, Reed Wall. Others felt like the citizens of Rapture took them for granted, and some felt that they were cheated.
We make it all run. The brains in those bots and cameras, that's us. Automatic bathysphere navigation, calculating genetic probabilities for new plasmids, hell, regulating water pressure so this place ain't a fish tank. It's all Rapture central computing. Not that we get the recognition. Funny thing about living in the city tomorrow, everybody takes it for granted.
Hey, Felix. I hear Porter is really happy about the new trajectory calculation routine. You know, the one that we worked on for 6 months? The one you took all the credit for? Oh, that reminds me. If you're looking for the key to your brand new office, you might want to check in the Circus of Values down the hall. Hope you brought your milk money, asshole.